What's up, everybody? Welcome to Culture Binge for June 12th, 2019. This is Wisecrack's Culture Podcast. My name is Jared. Let me introduce the other culture bingers that we have with us today. We have Surbhi.
Hi.
And we have Alec.
Hey.
All right. So today, let me give you guys a little bit of a breakdown of what we're going to be talking about. First, Alec is going to talk about Google Stadia and cloud-based gaming. Then Surbhi's going to be talking about some news regarding everyone's favorite entrepreneur, Gwyneth Paltrow. Then I'm going to be talking about Keanu Reeves and what I teased earlier, the Keanussiance. We're going to be talking about Hollywood actors and video games. Then Surbhi's going to tell us about something called a grief telephone booth in Japan. If we have time, we're going to be talking about Instagram influencers taking pictures at Chernobyl. And then also, if we have time, we may talk about a 13-year-old ASM artist who's quitting YouTube after her videos being taken down for being, quote, too sexual. All right, 1 second. All right, but first, we're going to do the segment that we did last time called Slaps or Chaps. Does it chap your ass or does it slap? Or if we're being true to the rules of grammar, does it slap your ass? So this is basically what you guys are into, what you're not into. Since I usually go first, let's have someone else go first. Alec, would you like to start us off with what's been chapping your ass and what's been slapping your ass lately?
I want to start on a note of positivity. What slaps is this deep fake of Mark Zuckerberg that is clearly trolling Facebook. I think we have the audio of it queued up. It's a video. Can we play that for the wonderful listeners?
Imagine this for a second. One man with total control of billions of people's stolen data, all their secrets, their lives, their futures. I owe it all to Spectre. Spectre showed me that whoever controls the data controls the future. Imagine this for a second.
So for those of you not watching, that was actually an image of Mark Zuckerberg saying these things, and it's quite convincing.
Yeah, and I don't really know what Mark Zuckerberg sounds like, so even if his voice is a little bit off, I would not ever know. I put a link in the live chat for everyone of that Instagram post. First of all, it's just fucking hilarious. There's a bunch of these videos. There's one of Morgan Freeman. There's one of Kim Kardashian, which we'll play in a second, not quite yet. They all allude to Spectre, which I think is a reference to the Bond villain organization. And they're all about how the Kim Kardashian one, for instance, is all about how she got famous off of stealing your data. Can we play that, Tim?
When there's so many haters, I really don't care because their data has made me rich beyond my wildest dreams. My decision to believe in Spectre literally gave me my ratings and my fan base. I feel really blessed because I genuinely love the process of manipulating people online for money.
Yeah, these are great. And I read an article that was pretty interesting. So recently, Facebook had, it wasn't a deep fake, but had declined to take down a doctored photo of Nancy Pelosi, saying, I forget their exact rationale, but you know, they say they're trying to combat fake news, and then there was a doctored photo that made her look very drunk. So for them to posting on Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, a doctored photo of Mark Zuckerberg talking about how he wants to control the world, it's just amazing to me. It really slaps. Possibly it slaps my ass in a good way. Yeah, what do you guys think of that?
Well, first of all, I saw the link in the chat before we started recording, and I didn't know what it was. I had zero context. So when I saw I saw the Kim Kardashian one first, and I clicked on it, and I have never watched Keeping Up with the Kardashians. I don't exactly know what Kim Kardashian sounds like. So I was initially like, wow, Kim Kardashian is like super self-aware. I can see why she would want to do something like this, and that people would actually really appreciate that brutal transparency. But then I was like, oh, no, wait, this is a deep fake. And I found it very funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
The actress's voice who did Kim Kardashian, it makes me uncomfortable. Like, and I think that's probably how Kim Kardashian sounds, but it was just so overly sexual. It felt like an ASMR.
Oh, I don't think it's an actress. I think, please anyone correct me if I'm wrong. I think it is this technology will take hours and hours of your voice and then synthesize it. So if it sounds off, there is a Donald Trump one though that does not. It sounds like an impression of him, which might just be the algorithm being bad. But you would think of all the thousands of hours of Trump talking, it might be a little bit better.
That can't be how she actually sounds. It sounds like a parody.
Yeah. Is that real?
The technology does exist to fake this. I think I brought this up before, maybe I didn't, but there's a Radiolab episode where this is like a year ago, where this company essentially could get Barack Obama in video to say anything, algorithmically generated, and any politician for that matter. So I don't know if this one is specifically voice actors, but I think at this point it doesn't matter, because someone like me or you or any of us could watch and be like, oh yeah, I guess that's what Mark Zuckerberg sounds like.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. As far as Chaps Mask, Jared, you might hate me for this, but there is an article in Gizmodo about a genre which, thank God, YouTube is now cracking down on. But like sometimes people are into nature footage of animals attacking each other, or sort of like heartwarming, this animal saved their child from a predator. Well, this is people staging snakes attacking puppies and sometimes kittens, and then having like children or other things save the animals. So like there will be disclaimers like, oh, these snakes are our pets, but like the puppies are still getting like bitten and whatever snakes do to them. One has 500,000 views, and now Facebook is banning them. So that chat.
Why would I hate that? That sounds fucking horrible.
You hate even acknowledging that shit like this exists.
Oh, well, now that I know, I'm glad that YouTube's cracking down on it. That is fucked up.
Yeah, super fucked up. And part of me is also, I mean, this is the logic of YouTube taken to an extreme, but it is essentially like all these stage stunts and everything. This is just the logical conclusion of that, except in a really much more fucked up way. Anyway.
Yeah. All right, Surbhi, what you got for us?
So my slap chap is combined. It's about the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund. So this aspect of the fund was only funded for 5 years after 9/11, and it provided financial support for those who suffered serious medical conditions. So this was not only like people who were like around the place, but also first responders. So once we reached that 5-year deadline, the victims of the attacks were no longer able to receive financial assistance. So Jon Stewart has been just on this amazing crusade to get medical coverage for these people. And he gave this impassioned testimony the other day. And the good news is that the bill is moving forward. So what chaps is that it took this long to get it done. But what slaps is that hopefully first responders and others will be able to receive assistance with their medical conditions.
There was one, the video is of him yelling at Congress is pretty great, but there's one moment where he's like, the people on that plane weren't yelling death to Tribeca, they were yelling death to America, which I thought in a very serious speech was a moment of levity that I really appreciated.
Yeah, it was really powerful. I watched most of the speech, and I haven't really been following that very much, but the mere fact that this is a point of contention, that Congress needs to be convinced that we should take care of the 9/11 first responders, is fucked up.
And this, even was it 5 years ago when he was still on the Daily Show, he kind of gave like a very, not out of character, but like a very similar impassioned speech telling Congress to stop fucking around, because they were, I don't know if it was this exact bill, but it was a first responders bill. Do you remember that, Surbhi?
I do, but I don't know the specifics of it. I just vaguely have a memory of it. But I think it's so shameful. Like if there's any issue that everybody should get behind, it should be something like this.
Yeah.
So it's very disappointing that it took this long for the fund to be reauthorized.
Definitely. All right. Well, my slaps and chaps is a little bit more lighthearted than what Surbhi brought up. But for me, what slaps, as you guys know, E3 is going on right now, and they finally showed some gameplay and some pretty awesome trailers for the Final Fantasy VII remake, and it looks awesome. way better than I thought it was going to look, especially the combat. And this is really my biggest fanboy thing. I've never really been that passionately into Marvel movies, but my first hardcore fan obsession was Final Fantasy VII, and
Before
watching
the
those.
Matrix?
This was before the Matrix.
Damn.
I was definitely 100% on the train with the Matrix. I mean, that was my biggest fandom, and that one got a little bit unhealthy. But with Final Fantasy VII, that was the property that made me obsessed with storytelling, visual storytelling, and seeing these trailers and seeing the gameplay really made me feel like a kid again. And it made me realize that, oh, okay, this is what people feel that are really into the Avengers, that are really into these various fan community-based IP. And it felt nice to kind of like just be had like that. Like, oh my, the Squaresoft, they have me by the balls. If it costs, because first of all, it's only like a third of the game that they're releasing in April, and nobody knows how long it's going to take for the entire game to come out. And even if it costs $300 over the course of 6 years, I'm in. They got me. And
what if they Half-Life you, man?
What does that mean?
Half-Life, they it was supposed to be a trilogy and they never released the third one.
Oh, I mean, that's certainly a possibility. I won't be very happy about that, but that's certainly a possibility. It's also a possibility that Final Fantasy 16 will never exist because they're just going to be remaking Final Fantasy 7 for the next decade. But either way, it was pretty awesome to see how the game's coming along. What chaps my ass, though, is the voice acting. It's super hokey. And Alec and I have actually talked about this. We were considering making a video about it, but I think I'm going to play the game when it comes out. I think I'm going to play it in Japanese just because the hokiness of the English voice acting is really taking me out of it. And I know that the game is not going to affect me like it did in its original incarnation, not only because I was younger and it was a different time in my life and there's the whole nostalgia factor thing, but also because when I would read something, when it was just text on screen back then, I can kind of consume it in the way and kind of dramatize it in my head in the way that I think it's supposed to be said. And you're not able to do that with voice acting. So the way that I compensate with this is just by having it in Japanese, which is a language that I cannot understand. And so it still is able to maintain the mystique that works for me if it's read in a language that I don't understand. But I don't want to go on too much of a tangent about this, but there was something interesting in the recent game Sekiro. It actually gives you a notification that you can play this in English, but it was meant to be played in Japanese with subtitles. And there is something interesting about language in how, like, for example, if let's say you're listening to an opera in German or in Italian and you don't understand either language, it's still, I think the sonic qualities of the language will affect you differently if you listen to it in German versus Italian. And I don't really know how to describe that. But for example, I recently played Devil May Cry 5 and I played it on Japanese for this exact reason, because the sonic qualities of Japanese made it less hokey for me and enabled me to be immersed in the world a bit more. So that's what chaps. I don't think anything's going to change. I think that unfortunately Final Fantasy always was kind of live action hokey anime, which I'm not really into. And that's the version I'm going to get. And hopefully I'll just play it in Japanese and things will hopefully go over all right.
I'm rooting for you. I hope it doesn't crush your dreams.
No, I'm not putting that much stock into it. I'm just excited that someone's taking my childhood and putting a lot of money into revitalizing it in such amazing detail and glory. But anyway, let's get into the main segment. So I think, Alec, you've got the first story today.
Yeah, I want to talk about Google Stadia, which for anyone who doesn't know, it is a cloud-based gaming platform. Essentially, you can stream video games. So you don't need a console. You don't need a really expensive PC. One article I read, someone it's almost like the Chromecast, or it is like the Chromecast dongle, Chromecast Ultra, and then a Chromebook. They were playing the new Doom game. And said, there was a couple issues because it's still not fully formed. It crashed a few times, but overall, they said they would have had no idea that they were playing it from a server somewhere else. Just some interesting background information here for people who are interested. So Stadia announced kind of pricing and what the deal is. So what is important for a lot of people is just the my question is, how could you possibly respond in real time to a video game and not have all this lag? So the internet requirements are either 10 megabits a second for 720p, or for 4K, you need 30 to 35. So that might suck for rural players and people who don't have access to higher internet. I just did a speed test before this because I was like, oh, what is my internet at? So I think mine is fine. I'm not bragging. It's just I live in a city. And as far as like, if you want to be sort of first on board, the Founders Edition, which is I believe the Chromecast Ultra it's called, and then a controller. It's $129, and then the whole thing is $999 a month. The thing that kind of sucks about this is that you still, on top of paying $999, you have to buy the games. So $999 just for the opportunity to spend presumably 50 or 60 bucks. So that feels a little weird, although they are going to release a free version where you also still have to buy the game. So I'm a little bit confused about that. I have very specific things to say about this, but I just wanted to sort of gauge, like, what is your overall opinion of this, Jared? Surbhi mostly plays The Sims, but Surbhi also, do you have any opinion?
Well, I actually played Doom a lot when I was growing up. So yeah, I love Doom. So I was like perked up right away when I heard that Doom's making a comeback.
Yeah. As far as this, I don't see why this is. I don't see how this is something that gamers want. If anything, after living through, 7 console generations, the one takeaway that I think all people have learned is that it's always about the software and not the hardware. And it doesn't matter how awesome the specs on your console is. Even in this console generation, I believe the Xbox One is more powerful than the PlayStation 4, but PlayStation 4 has all the good exclusives, and that's why it's blowing Xbox out of the water. As far as it being able to stream, I mean, I live in a city and I pay what I think is too much for internet. I don't think it's the premium package that Time Warner or whoever is offering, but it vacillates. Like, it's not always in a decent megabits per second. So, I mean, just the idea of like, oh, if my internet's going slow tonight, I'm not going to be able to play video games. That really sucks. Also, loading or lagging for somebody like me who doesn't play a lot of online games, it's not a problem that I need to get fixed. So it's kind of, shout out to one of our writers and directors, Michael Lux. He uses this term solutionism, which is basically that Silicon Valley will, in order to get growth, they'll just try to solve issues for problems that don't exist. And I feel like this is that. It's that. Well, I don't know. Actually, I'm curious to see what you think about how Microsoft's addition to this, because Microsoft did just announce a new system and they are selling it based on its extremely impressive specs, but they have a different project that's like Microsoft Cloud or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm pleased to see that they are not doing the Google Stadia thing and trying to sell at least me, I won't speak for all gamers, at least trying to sell me something that I don't see that I would immediately need or benefit from. However, they did show a trailer for the new Halo game that I guess is going to be one of the launch titles with their new, I think it's called Project Scarlet. And that game doesn't look like something that couldn't run on Xbox One. It doesn't look like a next step. So I understand how companies are trying to achieve this next step in gaming, where perhaps since the PlayStation 4, the graphics still look so good, and we're seeing demos on next gen consoles that don't look like a graphical step forward. I see why they would want to go into the realm of, oh, now just like the Switch, you can play it anywhere on anything, but that just doesn't do anything for me. I don't need that. I would much rather that it's Sony, because I know Sony was not at E3 this year. If they skipped this whole cloud gaming thing and just bought another Naughty Dog Studios and invested in another Santa Monica Studios and just had more God of War games and had more Last of Us games, because it's always the software that's going to win.
Well, so you're a console gamer. I've traditionally been a PC gamer, and I know that should theoretically get pretty contentious according to the internet. I feel like for a lot of people on the PC, like, it's all about hardware. Like, they run better graphics. They got 120 frames per second, even though your eye can't process that, but whatever. So it's all about that. So for me, I'm not spec obsessed in that way, but just the idea that I don't have to spend $1,000 on a processor or graphics card to get the best graphic experience is alluring, but everything else you say, I think is true. But really what I want to talk about is some of the implications of this. So one article I was reading made a very good point in that this is an overall trend of kind of not owning our things anymore. So obviously with Netflix, we stream our shows. I love Netflix. I'm not complaining about it, but same thing with Uber. You don't necessarily own a car. You sort of rent the service for a little bit. And in specific context of video games, I think that kind of endangers a lot of great stuff, especially like on PCs. So a great thing about gaming on PC is that you have people constantly like hacking games, modding games, sometimes with or without permission, which has led to some really amazing things. But also just the fact that when publishers go out of business, that people have the files on their computer and then can upload it as abandonware, right? This is why you can download like all these crazy ROMs from these game studios that don't exist anymore and nobody matters. But if you're just streaming the game, that kind of disappears. And I worry that we'll kind of lose a little bit of not internet history, but like gaming history. The other big thing, and so the other big thing here is that just from a consumer standpoint, another article I read brought the possibility of like, what if your games disappear? With Steam, at least, you download it, it's on your computer. If it gets removed from Steam, you still have it. But they point to, I guess, PlayStation Now, they had released some Assassin's Creed games on PlayStation Now. And then a year later, they were off the store. And even if you purchased them, you couldn't play them. So that's kind of shitty. And also, I think it speaks to go back to my earlier point. So certain writers have called this sort of like a new feudalism where we no longer have any kind of assets. Instead, we rent things. In the feudal system, you have peasants working on land that they didn't own. Now, obviously, we're not in that situation, but the great example is John Deere, for instance. You license the software that runs your tractor. You don't own it, so that you don't have the right to repair it. If something goes wrong, you can't. Like it's black box, you can't fix it. And then, Microsoft Word is another example. It used to be you just owned it. Now you have to license it and be subject to all their whims. So I think overall the problems with this are we lose a lot of agency in the world, even if it's something as superficial as like not being able to fix the things that you own or being able to fiddle with them. But also like we lose control. We're at the mercy of often algorithms and different terms of service. And especially in video games with DRM, there's just been an increasing, I guess, war on our kind of rights as consumers to use the media how we want. So that's my spiel.
This reminds me of Apple products and the idea that we don't actually own any of our Apple devices, that we sort of like they're like licensed because Apple can like slow down our phones, like if they feel like like our battery and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I think that this is a bad move, and my inclination is that I don't think Google Stadia is going to do well, because I don't think, once again, people say that, they're hiring the best of the best people and they're going to have some software announcements soon that are really going to blow people's pants off. But I'm skeptical about that. I'm also skeptical that, remember when the Xbox One was announced and they had this thing where you had to be online when you were playing games and they had to be verified, and that would make it so that you could no longer just hand one of your friends a disc and let them borrow it. That was a huge backlash, and they still haven't recovered from that. I mean, it was because of that and the fact that they put what is that, like the whatever the Microsoft version of the iToy is, they put that in the box, made it $100 more expensive. Nobody wanted that piece of shit.
Are you talking about the Kinect?
Yeah, the Kinect.
Yeah.
Do you have an Xbox, right?
Yeah. Do I have a Kinect?
Exactly. But anyway, they still haven't recovered from that. And Sony just swept the floor with them by having a marketing campaign that was like, hey, if you get a PlayStation 4, you're going to allow yourself to let friends borrow your stuff just by handing them a disc. And Google Stadia, first of all, that's not going to be possible. Second of all, you're right. I mean, you don't get to own your own stuff, and that kind of sucks. I don't see any benefits for gamers. I don't see it.
It seems like like Google and Microsoft adopted like a B2B software as a service model, which works really well for large organizations, but it doesn't work well for like an individual consumer, like a gamer.
Yeah, and the only way they're going to make that work is if they do monopolize all of the good content that one could argue Sony has kind of done. But I mean, even a company as big as Google, it still will take them a while to generate the kind of relationships that would be able to create a game as good as God of War or Red Dead 2 or The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Surbhi, you want to talk about
Gwyneth Paltrow,
yes,
everyone's favorite actress and health journalist. My girl Gwen, she recently did an interview and said that she and her new husband maintain separate houses and they only stay together about 4 days a week. And she said, all my married friends say that the way we live sounds ideal and we shouldn't change a thing. And she said that she and her husband do this in part because they both have children from previous marriages and that they'd like to gradually blend their families. And there's been some mocking, and someone said that this sounds like rich people's stuff because who else can afford 2 houses? And nothing really surprises me anymore when it comes to Gwyneth Paltrow. So I think this feels pretty tame and very on brand for her.
She's not telling people to put eggs in their vagina. So this seems like not a big deal.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Alec is referring to, so Gwyneth Paltrow has a lifestyle brand called Goop. And if you don't know, goop.com is a lifestyle website that it has like articles, it has like a store where you can buy things, and it's known for revolutionary ideas like shoving jade eggs up one's vagina to increase a woman's sexual energy and health.
Wait, quick question. I don't mean to interrupt. Do they have butthole eggs too?
Well, I mean, that's that's an untapped market.
I'll pitch that to her. Sorry, continue.
That's a Q3. That's a Q3 roadmap. So she's also talking about doing at-home coffee enemas and taking a blend of essential oils to cure one's depression. So the fact that she and her husband don't live together full time, to me, it's just, if anything, it sounds like one of Gwyneth's more normal ideas.
Yeah, when I wasn't sure if you were going to make fun of her, because when I read this, of course, yes, maintaining 2 homes is something exclusively a rich person could do. But the way we never kind of talk about how families are, there's lots of different ways families are structured all over the world. Like in Spain, you have 3 generations living together, and different kinds of situations exist everywhere, but we don't really discuss it. We're just like, oh, there's a mom and a dad, and then some kids, and then there's some variations on that, whatever. But especially with the amount of people divorced, because their whole thing is that they don't, like, she doesn't want it to be super disruptive for her kids. He doesn't want it to be super disruptive for his kids, but they also went like on a 2 family vacation with all the divorce. She used to be married to Coldplay guy. Yeah, it seems normal and maybe possibly healthy.
Yeah, I think maybe one of the reasons why this is turning people off is because there's kind of the sentiment that relationships are hard, and that if you're in a marriage, it's the good and the bad. And now that Gwyneth Paltrow is just this enormously rich person, she thinks that she can kind of curate her life to where she can separate the good and the bad of the marriage. And I think for a lot of people, they kind of fetishize the pain of a relationship, which I understand. I mean, you do want to romanticize the things in your life that are not going as well, because I mean, there's a whole nother thing where you can't always be happy, and you can't always be happy in your relationship as well. And so I can understand the sense of disdain for somebody who claims to be in a marriage, and yet they never see each other and they don't have to live in the same house. Then at that point, can you really call it a marriage when some people are living, like you said, with multiple generations, and all the struggles that come with a relationship and maintaining a family under one household and raising kids. I mean, that's a lot of hard shit. And I don't know. What do you think about that?
He stays there 4 times a week, I think I saw in the article, or she.
Yeah, 4 times a week, at least 4 times a week.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, if I was in that situation, I had a shit ton of money, I'd do it. No judgment. I'll judge everything else she does, but
So
I mean, if it's good for your kids, I mean,
yeah.
obviously, I don't know what's good for Gwyneth Paltrow's or her husband's kids. I assume they do.
it wouldn't work for me personally, but I can understand that there are different needs. Like every relationship is different and every family dynamic is different. So I'm impressed that they've figured this out and that they've found somebody else who believes the same thing that they do. And I think it's quite nice that they are putting their children first and above their own needs or desires. And I also read that she has a house for the Coldplay guy. She has a room in her house for the Coldplay guy. So he can like come over and hang out with the kids. And I mean, it seems strange at first, but maybe it's the healthiest thing for them.
I don't even have a place to put my cat's litter box, and they have a fucking room for their ex-husband.
You have to come on the honeymoon too. You should bring your cat if you ever decide to do something like that.
Yeah.
I think I brought this up on another podcast. I'll just mention that I was once a PA on some infomercial that Gwyneth Paltrow was starring in, and she was very nice to everybody. She was
didn't
great.
like lecture you on vaccines or
None of
essential
that.
oils.
No, I mean, I interacted with her very minimally. I was the lowest on the totem pole at that job. Sure. All right, guys. Unless there's anything else you wanted to say about that, Surbhi?
No, go Gwen.
All right, so we're going to be talking about Keanu Reeves and what I'm calling the Keanussiance. So over the last couple days, Keanu Reeves' love has taken over Reddit. Literally every other meme is celebrating him, appreciating him for dealing with all the tragedies that he's gone through in his life. So for the purposes of catching everybody up, I'm going
unaware.
I'm going to itemize the list of things that Keanu Reeves has dealt with in his life. So this list is from Snopes. So his dad left when he was 3. He struggled with dyslexia and attended 4 different schools because of it. When he was 23, his best friend, River Phoenix, brother of Joaquin Phoenix, died. In 1999, his child was stillborn, costing him his relationship. Soon after, the mother of that child was killed in a car accident.
Jesus Christ.
I know. His sister has been battling leukemia for years, and then I believe either during the filming of The Matrix Reloaded, it got like really bad, and I think he had to take a sabbatical or something to take care of her, but she is still alive, but she is still constantly fighting it. And then I think that's it for the tragedy stuff, but in terms of why people love him, he doesn't flex his wealth like a lot of other stars. He doesn't, I think he does own a nice house, but he doesn't go around flexing in fancy cars and stuff or fancy clothes. And then there have been those pictures of him taking the subway, which I guess he sometimes often does. And I'm asking myself, like, why is this happening? It's not just because the John Wick movies are so awesome. And I really think that Keanu Reeves is like a tragic hero, or maybe even an absurd hero. He's undergone so much tragedy in his life, and he still remains a model of humanity. He maintains a sunny disposition. He's a very hard worker, and he dedicates his life to his passions. He's got a motorcycle shop that he owns. He has an experimental literary publishing house.
What?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
It's called X something, but it's relatively new. They've published a handful of books, and all of them are pretty artistic, pretty experimental. And he's always hosting live readings of some of these things. And he is dedicated to preserving martial arts, not only personally, what he keeps up with the martial arts that he learned during the Matrix films, but also preserving martial arts in cinema. I mentioned in the John Wick podcast and previously that he brought over the whole stunt team for the Raid movies in John Wick 3. He made a movie called Man of Tai Chi that he directed, which is actually pretty awesome. He's become a kind of memeified role model for how to keep on going in a painful existence. He really is an inspiration. I want to talk a little bit more about this kind of memeified Keanu Reeves thing going on. So he's in this movie, this Netflix movie called Always Be My Maybe, starring Ali Wong and Randall Park, and he plays himself. And I haven't seen the movie, but just from the trailer, it's clear that he's playing a romantic interest of Ali's, that the character that, that the character that Randall Park is playing, he can't possibly compete with the real Keanu Reeves. There's just this aura about him that he is the perfect, beautiful, kind man. And how am I supposed to compete with that? So there's something interesting about this Keanussiance because it's definitely different than the McConaissance, which, if you guys remember, was the Matthew McConaughey, where he was adored less for his personal qualities, although that's still definitely kind of part of it, but it was more so his virtuosic performances in roles like in True Detective, in Dallas Buyers Club, and Wolf of Wall Street, and Interstellar, and all of that happened within like a year and a half. I think by contrast, Keanu Reeves is adored less for his prowess as an actor and more for him lending his, quote, real life self to his on-screen performances. I feel like he's kind of becoming a brand like Schwarzenegger once was, because Schwarzenegger wasn't celebrated because he was a great actor, but he had this presence that created his own microgenre of, quote, Schwarzenegger movies. And I don't think Keanu Reeves quite has his own microgenre like Schwarzenegger, but his presence does transcend the role. So he voices the cat Keanu in the Key and Peele movie Keanu, which is in itself a kind of Keanu Reeves John Wick joke. He plays a stuntman in the new Toy Story 4 movie that's coming out later this month. The stuntman is called Duke Kaboom. And although Keanu Reeves doesn't do his own stunts, he does do all of his own fights. And so I think there is kind of another like memified thing in that. And it's examples like these. It's kind of like it's less what Keanu does, but that he does it. And I think that that's like a kind of a very privileged, interesting status of celebrity that we don't see very often. And I'm curious, how do you guys interact with Keanu Reeves? Are you guys obsessed? Do you guys love him as much as I do?
I really like hearing about people who are resilient. I
Yeah.
think it's one of the greatest qualities that people can develop. So when I see somebody like Keanu Reeves who's developed the ability to regulate his emotions, move forward, and maintain like a positive outlook on life, it's inspiring to me.
Absolutely.
I did not have nearly as much of an appreciation for him as you do, but now I think I do. The the literary publisher really got me. I like him. Like I like him in I've seen John Wick 2. I haven't seen the rest. I like Bill and Ted. Like I like all that shit. So I don't think anything negative of him. But yeah, it's weird because he's a meme, but he's not a meme like Jeff Goldblum is, or he's not a meme like
Well, it's something similar like that.
I don't know, like or like Bill
But he's
Murray.
not ironically cool like Jeff Goldblum is.
Right. Or Bill Murray is a good example of like Bill Murray is a personality and just kind of shows up and is Bill Murray. So he's not that. And I mean, the other big meme about him is he doesn't age, and that's a great meme.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I don't really have much to say besides like I find it kind of weird and interesting and fascinating. And we don't have to talk about this just yet, but our next topic will be cyberpunk. But I do have specific thoughts about that. I don't know if you had anything else to say.
All I'll say is I love Keanu Reeves, and he is one of my favorite actors for that exact reason. It's not necessarily, I mean, he's not Daniel Day-Lewis. He's not Gary Oldman. You know, he's not somebody who disappears into a role. And if one were to say that an actor should be judged based on their ability to act, there are certainly people who show a greater range than him. I mean, even someone like me who loves Keanu Reeves will admit that if you watch Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola movie, he is awful in it. Awful. And I mean, I'm going to go ahead and chalk that up to bad casting rather than it being his fault. But maybe that's just another thing that you chalk up to resilience. Even, you know, a good decade, he was just lampooned as a horrible actor, but he just kept working, didn't let the haters get him down, found a whole new passion in his life with martial arts. He carved out a career for himself as an action filmmaker and action star. And maybe that's just another thing that people really see in him and admire. I mean, I'm one of those people.
You know who's an example of this that like I personally admire similarly, like Vin Diesel, not the best actor, but I fucking love him and the movies he's in because he's a huge D&D nerd. And I forgot what he agreed to do some big blockbuster movie. Maybe it was one of the Fast and Furiouses so that he can make a movie based off of his D&D character. And I will always respect him for that.
Is that movie out?
Yeah, it's something about witches. Witches, or it's like, it's not Helsing. God damn it. I'm gonna have to Google this. Vin Diesel D&D movie. The Last Witch Hunter.
Huh. I haven't heard of that.
I think it's not a good movie, but still love the guy. But so speaking of this idea that like Keanu Reeves is not a particularly good actor, although he's great in roles like John Wick. So one thing I want to talk about is the barrage of celebrities being cast in video games, which I think is new. Maybe it's popped up before, but I'm not really aware of it. So for people who aren't familiar, so Cyberpunk 2077 is a game very much hyped. All of our patrons in our Discord are obsessed with it. It's made by the same studio by The Witcher, which is like a beloved series. So it's a game, it's cyberpunk, hackers and shit like that. So E3, they put out a trailer, and at the very end of the trailer, like they show a cutscene where your character gets knocked out or passes out or something like that. And then, surprise, Keanu Reeves is in it. And that's like the big reveal, and everyone's like, holy shit, Keanu Reeves is in this movie. Aside from that, yeah, in the game. So aside from that, there's also Norman Reedus, who is the actor. He plays Daryl in The Walking Dead. He's also the guy in the Boondock Saints. So he's in Death Stranding. And then there's a Ubisoft game, and I can't remember the name, but the guy who plays the Punisher and is also Shane in The Walking Dead is cast in that as well. And I'm probably missing a lot of example, but the basic idea is that actors are now being cast there. Oh, and one of our patrons also brought up, this was a while ago, but Kevin Spacey was in a Call of Duty video game. And so when I saw Keanu Reeves show up in this trailer, it reminded me of a video I just watched, and it's a really great video. I recommend it to everyone. Lindsay Ellis on her channel did a video about Robin Williams in Aladdin. He plays the genie, for anyone who doesn't know, and how that kind of ruined animation in ways that still persist today. So traditionally in animation, you had voice actors, and voice acting is a different skill set than acting. Obviously, there is portable skills there, but you don't have your body to use. You often have to use different voices. So animation prior to that often just relied on like great, well-known voice actors. Robin Williams agreed to be, as Lindsay Ellis documents, he agreed to be in Aladdin because he wanted to be part of animation and wanted something to sort of connect with his child, but explicitly told them, you better not use my likeness to sell toys. I will be very mad. And that's exactly what they did. And they used his likeness to promote the movie too. And ever since that movie did well, you just have celebrities being cast in it, and not just like, oh, FYI, James Earl Jones is in The Lion King, but if you look at their Lion King remake, every single character being voiced by a celebrity has a different poster. So it's, Donald Glover as, I forget who he plays, and then Seth Rogen as so-and-so. So it's just a marketing blitz to get all these people. And, I love Donald Glover and I love Seth Rogen, but from a performance standpoint, they're not necessarily the best, most qualified voice actors for that. Not that I care too much. And I worry that a similar thing is going to happen in video games. So sure, like if Death Stranding had Daniel Day-Lewis because he's such a great actor, or even nothing against Norman Reedus, maybe he's the best person for that role and Kojima is sort of an auteur in that way, fine. But when it comes to, we're going to slap Keanu Reeves in this, we're going to put the Punisher guy in this because we know it'll sell more things, I'm just very kind of skeptical of that. Although people seem to have mixed reactions. What do you all think of that?
Well, this is a complicated thing. So in the case of, so you're using the term likeness, and I don't think likeness means like their facial features, basically
Sure.
their person. Whereas I think that like the genie doesn't look like Robin Williams, but I think they're just using his name, right?
Yeah, sorry, his name.
And so when people lend their likeness to a piece of animation, then I think it is appropriate to cast a celebrity. So for example, I think like in a Shark Tale, Chris Rock was voicing one of the fish, and I think the fish actually did look like him. So in that scenario, I think it is appropriate if you are lending your whole likeness. I would say in a similar thing like Death Stranding, it's a real performance these days. I mean, they've got motion capture gear on that captures every wrinkle, every move of their face. They are emoting, and the cameras are catching that. And that is essential to the quote performance. I mean, this is the same reason why Andy Serkis is getting Oscar nominations for, playing King Kong, or playing the monkey from the Planet of the Apes movie, Caesar, or playing Gollum. I mean, he really is giving as much life to the character as the motion graphics animators.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. So there's that on one end, which is that it is a legitimate performance. But my concern is they're not casting these people for performance sake. They're casting them for marketability, right?
But that's been the case for every Hollywood movie since the 10s.
Yeah, well, it actually reminded me of what's the video where we talk about the memification of actors, where we talk about personas, in that there were so many movies being made and not a ton of way to differentiate them. So like there's these archetypes like the vamp or the Casanova or whatever, but then all of a sudden you would brand your person as like the best Casanova, right? And then that celebrity becomes a brand, and obviously big names still get affixed to it, but it was very much kind of, because all the movies were so very similar. I worry that essentially when it comes to the 8th or 10th or however many Call of Duties there are versus Ghost Recons versus, at some point, as someone who plays a lot of hours of video games, but not a lot of different video games, oftentimes those things blur to me. And I wonder if it's just a product differentiator to be like, oh yeah, that's the one with Keanu Reeves. And again, like, sure, it's a real performance, but was Keanu Reeves cast? He wasn't necessarily cast because it's the best performance. He's not like the best actor for that job. Or maybe he is. I don't know.
Well, like we just said, Keanu Reeves is he's a unique case because he is a meme as much as he is an actor. But I would say Norman Reedus is not like that. It's not that game with Norman Reedus. I don't really think Norman Reedus is so famous that he draws more gamers than Hideo Kojima's name, or Hideo, whatever it is. By the way, it's probably more since like the 20s or 30s, not the 10s, as I said before. But I hear what you're saying. But then again, think about in like 1980, I think John Hurt won an Oscar. He played the Elephant Man, and like you could argue that a good 90% of that performance was the mask that somebody made for him.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you. I'm not saying it's not acting, right? I'm saying that if Norman Reedus was cast because like he auditioned and gave the best performance, and Kojima is again like an auteur who really cares about his art and is obsessive about it, that's awesome, right?
Which he is.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm a little less skeptical of that and more skeptical of just the cash grab, right? And you'll probably see both. You'll probably see like the auteurs, casting really good people, whoever's good for the job, and then the sort of like Lion King remake where it's like, fuck it, we got Seth Rogen on the poster.
I agree with you, Alec. I think it's frustrating for me when I see like film projects that are just stacked with well-known actors. For me, I like lesser known actors and projects because it's easier for me to forget what they've done in the past. So like when I like for example, in that Star Wars movie Solo, and Emilia Clarke, who plays Daenerys in Game of Thrones, it was hard for me to not think, oh, Khaleesi, like look at what Khaleesi's doing. Like, so I like things like that, like lesser known people. And when I see a movie, like a lot of these like Lion King and like, what was that other one? The Jungle Book, like when it's just like well-known actor after well-known actor, it turns me off and I don't want to watch it because it just feels like you just want like these fans to come in. You didn't really care too much about like the voice acting of it.
Yeah.
I totally agree with the Lion King thing. There's no reason that it needs to be Donald Glover or any of those actors. The only one that I'm glad is still there is James Earl Jones.
Oh, he is. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Shows you how much I've been paying attention to Lion King. I was going to say something, and
I think a good place where I agree with you when it comes to video games is in Metal Gear Solid 5. So Metal Gear 1 through 4 was voiced by a voice actor named David Hayter, who's also a very successful screenwriter. He wrote the first two X-Men movies, and then he also wrote the Watchmen adaptation, which I'm actually a big fan of. And for the fifth movie, I think him and Kojima just like didn't get along. Apparently Kojima's pretty hard to work with. And actually one of the people in our Discord who works in the gaming industry, shout out to Fossey, he says that there are a lot of things about working with Kojima that he's not the best person to work with. But they recast him with, what's the name of the guy from 24?
Oh, I just keep thinking Bauer because that's his name. And,
yeah.
Donald Sutherland.
Yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland.
Kiefer Sutherland, Donald Sutherland's son. So Kiefer Sutherland all of a sudden voices Big Boss in Metal Gear 5. And I don't think that the fact that it was a Hollywood actor versus David Hayter certainly didn't add anything for me. And I would have much preferred David Hayter do the voice again. Yeah. All right. Let's do one more. Surbhi, what do you got us? Something weird going on in Japan. Surprise, surprise.
This is a bittersweet story that I've thought of quite a few times since I heard of it. So let's travel to Otsuchi, a tiny town in northern Japan. During the 2011 tsunami, Otsuchi lost 10% of its population. So the year before, a man named Itaru Sasaki, please forgive me if I've mispronounced his name, he put a telephone booth with a disconnected rotary phone in his garden. And he did this because he said, because my thoughts couldn't be relayed over a regular phone line, I wanted them to be carried on the wind. So after the tsunami in this devastated town, word spread about his wind phone. And people from all over Japan traveled to his phone booth to speak to their lost loved ones. And people would have either long conversations or short updates. They would ask things like, how are you? Are you with mom? Are you happy? And then fill them in on their lives. And they do this because it helps them stay connected to their family and friends. And it helps them remember and keep them alive. And there was this great video that was just posted on BBC that shows that even today, people use this phone booth as a ritual or as a mechanism to process grief. And this is something that struck me as quite powerful because I don't have a lot of experience with death in my life. I've been very, very fortunate and lucky that at my age, I've only dealt with 2 people who have died. Longevity runs in my family. So I think that in the next few years, essentially half of my family will die all at once. So I'm always really interested in learning how people process grief or how they deal with mourning, because it's not something that we really talk about. And it's not something that we really share our experiences with. It's something that everybody deals with, but it's sort of like this topic where it's too intimate, it's too sensitive to discuss. So I thought this was a beautiful way to keep the memory of someone alive and to feel connected to them and to do it in such a positive way.
Okay. I did not think it was going to be that heartfelt.
I know. And I
thought it was
wanted
going to be
to
something a
warn
bit
you
bizarre.
when you said
No.
with weird things happening in Japan. I was like,
yeah, now I
he's gonna
sound
feel
like a monster.
Such an asshole.
Yeah, that's actually pretty awesome. I almost have nothing to add to that other than, wow. I mean, I'm glad that he set that up, and I'm glad that people are finding some help in it.
Yeah, it's really like sweet and heartfelt thing that I could never bring myself to do. I don't mean that judgmentally. I'm just saying, like, I'm glad these people are doing it. I would probably just make a lot of really fucked up jokes, which I have done when my friends have died.
Oh, see, I'm not willing to make that claim because I, similar to Surbhi, have never really experienced loss on the scale of that small town. And so I don't know what I would be like if I was put in their situation. And so I might be pushed to do something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't have yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, please continue.
Well, I was just going to say, I haven't dealt with that scale, but I remember horrifying. Me and my friend, one of our friends, good friends, died in college. And we immediately started telling like really, really fucked up jokes as like a coping mechanism. And I just remember people around us who also knew him were just like horrified, but couldn't say anything about it because we were better friends with him. So yeah.
I think using dark humor is like a pretty common coping mechanism. I think doctors and EMTs and other individuals and like law enforcement or the medical field do something like that. I have a friend who's a physician, and so some of the things that she says are sometimes a bit off color, and I have to remind myself that she doesn't mean it in an unkind way. It's more as a way to cope with it and to detach from the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm fortunate enough to where I've never lost a friend like that. I would imagine that, like Alec, I'd probably try to cope with it with some dark humor, but at the same time, especially when it's a whole community that's experienced loss, it's really nice to have like a central location for the whole community to share.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. Do you guys want to go into the mailbag, or you want to do one more?
Do we have a lot of emails? I didn't see them.
We've got 2.
Okay. I think let's do some viewer mail.
All right, guys, we're going to go into the mailbag. If you guys want to send us an email, hit us up at info@wisecrack.co, or you can hit us up at our movie podcast one, because we haven't set one up for this yet, at movies@wisecrack.co.
Before we get into it, I want to give a shout out to Tech Rock. Thank you for donating. He says Kojima with Death Stranding, Hollywood all over it. Don't fully understand that comment, but thank you for the donation.
Okay, cool. Actually, before we do that, we're going to go into our voicemail. If you want to hit us up, it's 213-534-8807. Tim, play the voicemail.
It's Franco. Going with the video games, it's sort of like changing the channel, or you're just shopping around for any goods or services that you want. When I play a video game or PC game, I try to brush up on what I've learned in college, which is financial management. And there are some games that I like, like the Tropico series, SimCity, or there's like an underrated Steam game called City State. And that kept my interest of what I learned about the real life and how they formed it into a video game. And that it's sort of like sharpening your mind, with with a book or a TV, a documentary. So to have that addiction, I would say that Call of Duty, for example, is like consuming a lot of donuts with lots of sugar in it. But with a game like City State, SimCity, the games that I just listed, they're more of the vegetables for the mind, or if not the protein or the beef. And that's all I have to say about that.
I think he's referencing, we both talked about video game addiction, but also meaningful labor in video games, and how for people who work bullshit jobs, it is often our only meaningful labor in our lives.
There's also something I want to bring up about that, is that today in Kotaku, there was an article that the game that is outselling all these Cyberpunk 2077 pre-orders, as well as everything else that was announced on E3, is a truck driving simulator game where all you do is just drive a truck through the highways and make sure you have enough gas. And I actually haven't played it, but it actually looks very calming. I watched a video of it before this podcast, and just seeing those very expansive vistas and hearing the slow hum of the engine, I can kind of see the appeal.
I was going to shout out our patrons for sharing that on the Discord, but you shared it on the Discord.
That was me.
Yeah, so I even told you, first of all, thank you, because I hear you on the vegetable versus donut. At the same time, I'm a person who plays games like SimCity or City State. I haven't played City State, but Jared knows I've been playing a lot of Surviving Mars, and way too much, actually, to the point where I had nightmares about it last night that my colonists are running out of food. I played a lot of first-person shooters too, and I feel like they helped me like with visual coordination in a way that's kind of helpful. And there's like strategy to it, or maybe not in Call of Duty, but in other first person shooters, you can think very strategically and sort of take the next level and do the metagame. And so in that world, I think it can help with a lot of critical thinking. And similarly, like I think there's like a crappy way to play SimCity. There's probably a way where it kind of becomes automatic, not very helpful, or sort of like a very informed, elevated way to do it. But yeah, I mean, I love those games, and that is definitely my kind of digital labor, is either building some empire or a colony, or God, I've played so much Civilization, but sorry.
The only thing I'll add on to that is my parents were sometimes critical of me playing video games when I was young, and I would always point them to the fact that all the kids that I know who are getting straight A's in school are all gamers. And
Oh,
that was
yeah.
actually a true thing.
I give my dad so much shit because he's got this boomer mentality of like, when I was a kid, I went outside and you assholes only stayed inside playing video games. And it's like, both of your sons are like pretty professionally successful because one of them played video games all day and became a computer programmer and now makes a ton of money. That's not me. And then the other one writes about pop culture, including tons of video games. So yeah, thank God I stayed inside all day. I mean, not really, but yeah.
I think the caller makes a great point in that through video games, and I would argue through like other media like films or books, we can experience things that we wouldn't normally have access to. So like civilization, building a civilization, or running a city state, or whatever some of these other games that he referenced you can do. I think that is really important. But I think the heart of the argument is not like what type of game you're playing, but more how often you're playing them. Like, whether you're playing like a sugary game or you're playing one of these vegetable games, if you're doing it 20 hours a day, that's still not healthy.
Yeah. I mean,
you can say that pretty much anything.
Yeah. Surviving Mars, very intellectually stimulating for me. But I played it usually I'm such a loser. I go to bed at like 10 or 11 every single day. And I stayed up till 1 and I woke up fucking exhausted. And I shouldn't have done that. And I feel bad and I feel like I have no self-control.
All right. Now we're going to. So once again, if you want to send us a voicemail, 213-534-8807 or 21-ELFGUT07. This email is from Daniel. Daniel says, this is about our discussion of incels. He says, I disagree with Surbhi on what guys need to do if they want to date women. I do not consider myself an incel. I also learned about them recently, and what I learned about their views of the world and women was quite alarming. But I know how it feels to want a girlfriend and don't have any luck until my late 20s, and a lot of my friends also feel this way. Surbhi says just being a nice guy and having something to say, I'm assuming he means, is enough. He says, I've been nice my whole life and not that boring, but wasn't successful with dating, romantic relationships, and also other people took advantage of me. I'm now not shy to say that I'm a bit nerdy and shy and overthinking, which causes literally an empty head if I try to talk to a pretty girl. This is actually a long email. I'm going to skip to close to the end. He says, basically what I want to say is there are nerds, geeks, and other weird people out there, and they have a hard time and also get pushed around by other people. I wasn't aware what the problem was back then, and other people also couldn't tell me. There are many people who are not naturals in interacting with women, and there is, at least where I live in Germany, nothing in the education system that helps you with that if you are missing out. I know that I sent this email to Surbhi last week. It's very long, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but
Surbhi, defend yourself.
Oh, yeah, I don't think it's necessarily combative at all.
No, Jared sent this to me as soon as it came in, and I read it and I was like, oh, wow, mail. And then after that, I like reread it and I thought about it a lot. And I agree completely with what you're saying. And this is one of the hardest parts about doing this podcast for me is taking a concept that's new to me, distilling my thoughts quickly, and then developing an opinion on it. I'm the type of person who likes to do a lot of research and sort of like meditate on something and then consider things before I develop an opinion. So when I learned about incels, I made a snap judgment and I projected a lot of what is attractive to me onto others. And in this article or in this email, Daniel said something like, I can't remember exactly, so please forgive me, Daniel, but I believe you said something like it was about confidence and learning how to like carry myself and things like that. And I agree with you. What's attractive to people is very specific. So it's not enough to be kind and have something interesting to say. I also didn't take into account multicultural differences, that maybe in specific cultures there's something else that's interesting. The point that I do want to reiterate, though, is that it's not, people shouldn't feel like they have to look a certain way to be attractive, that it's not always about looks. And for me, again, I'm just speaking for myself, that looks are not at the top of my list. It's more about somebody's personality or intelligence or kindness and things like that. So I hope that, like, if you like walk away from this podcast and you still think Surbhi hates incels, that's not it. It's more Surbhi wants you to know that it's not, you don't have to have plastic surgery to look a certain way. And I really appreciate your email and the gentle reminder that it's important to consider different perspectives before developing an opinion.
Yeah.
Amen.
I think it's also super complicated in a way that people won't tell you. Like, obviously confidence is part of it. But even, I mean, there's so many things to get into and I won't, but when people, and I've had friends do this saying, you know, they're only after my money or things like, certainly there are people there who are out there for your money, but people, I've noticed with a lot of friends, they seem to be looking in the wrong places and then complain that and men and women, that they only find assholes who either they only want sex or they're only interested in money or whatever. And so I think there's so many components. There's like, where are you looking? How are you looking? How are you presenting yourself? And to be honest, like, I mean, I also actually, after this podcast, watched the ContraPoints video on incels. And her argument is that it's kind of this very self-destructive, like movement that festers in a lot of hatred, not only with kind of having unrealistic expectations of like how you look, but the whole kind of package. And I think when someone is in that very negative space, there's even a component of like therapy. I'm not saying Daniel needs therapy because he couldn't find a woman or anything, but like when you're that deep in a hole, I feel like just to be kind of like a functioning human and be more social, not even just to date, like fixing that kind of stuff, I think is also a precursor. So my only point is, it's like part of it's confidence, part of it's how you're presenting yourself. Sometimes it's, I mean, I think people may want to just kind of, oh, I want to play video games for 18 hours a day and I want someone to love me for that. I think that might not be the best move. And for another point, I don't really watch Queer Eye for the straight guy, or I think it's called Queer Eye now, but there's an episode with a gamer that I love because like, he's kind of like, doesn't really have many friends, plays video games for way too many hours a day. And they kind of like take him to an anime meetup and he meets new people and he learns to cook and sort of like self-improvement. So it's not that the episode ends with him having a girlfriend or anything like that, but it's that kind of like improving yourself and among other things. I hope that was coherent.
It was. All right, I was going to go through one more, but I think we got to call it for today because we're going a little bit long. But I want to thank my co-hosts, Surbhi and Alec, for joining me.
Thank you so much, Sherrod. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. Don't forget to send us a voicemail at 213-534-8807 or send us an email at info@wisecrack.co or movies@wisecrack.co. We check both. As always, we'll see you guys next week, and we'll give you an update on the RSS feed for this podcast. We're going to be creating it soon. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.